The mysterious arrival. The endless darkness of space stretched infinitely, dotted by the cold, shimmering lights of distant stars. Among them, a star burned brightly, nearing the end of its life. Orbiting it, an armada of alien ships glided silently. These were the warships of the Vaxaran Empire, a species feared throughout the galaxy for their unmatched power. Their ships, sleek and colossal, were armed with weapons that could obliterate entire planets. The fleet's leader, Supreme Commander Thalax, stood tall on the bridge of the flagship, his confidence radiating like the sun. The Vaxaran fleet had gathered to celebrate their latest victory. They had crushed yet another rebellious world, ensuring that no one would dare challenge their dominance. Reports had come that the Deathworlders, humans from the infamous planet Earth, were their next obstacle. But to the Vaxarans, humanity was a joke. Earth, classified as a death world, was a planet so hostile that no other species would dare live there. Yet somehow, humans had not only survived but thrived. Thalax sneered as he gazed at the stars glow through the thick glass of the command deck. "The Deathworlders think they can resist us," he said to his second-in-command. "They are fools. Earth will burn, and its people will bow." Suddenly, an alert blared across the bridge. "Unidentified vessel entering the system," called out a panicked officer. The crew scrambled, their hands flying across glowing consoles. A ripple of confusion spread through the command deck. Thalax frowned. "Show me," he ordered. On the massive viewing screen, the image of the mysterious ship appeared. It was tiny compared to the Vaxaran ships, no bigger than a frigate. Its design was strange, unlike anything in the galactic records. Smooth and dark, the hull seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. There were no visible weapons or insignias, just a name etched on the side. Resolute. Laughter erupted from the crew. "Is this their best?" one officer mocked. "A single ship against the might of the Vaxaran Empire." Thalax's frown deepened. Something about the ship felt wrong. It wasn't fear, but a nagging unease in the back of his mind. "Scan the vessel," he ordered. As the scanners activated, the readings returned in bursts of static. "Commander, I can't get a clear reading," the officer said, his voice trembling. "The ship, it's emitting strange energy. It's like nothing we've seen before." Thalax's unease grew. "Prepare the fleet for defensive formation," he barked. "This is no ordinary ship." The Resolute floated silently, as if mocking the massive armada surrounding it. Then, without warning, it began to move. Slowly at first, then faster. Its engines glowed with a deep, unsettling blue. It was heading directly for the fleet. "Open a channel to the ship," Thalax commanded. "Let them know they face certain death." The communication officer complied, but no response came. Instead, the Resolute stopped abruptly. For a moment, it hung in the void, still and silent. Then, its front panels began to glow. A deep hum filled the airwaves, resonating across the fleet. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the walls of the Vaxaran ships. Crew members covered their ears as the sound became unbearable. "Commander, the ship is locking onto us," the tactical officer yelled. "Fire! Destroy it!" Thalax roared. The Vaxaran ships launched a barrage of plasma blasts and missiles. Bright streaks of energy lit up the darkness, all aimed at the tiny battleship. But as the weapons approached, something extraordinary happened. The Resolute seemed to shimmer, and the attacks passed through it as if it weren't there. The ship remained unscathed. Thalax's eyes widened in shock. "What is this trickery?" he muttered. Before anyone could answer, the Resolute retaliated. From its glowing panels, a burst of energy shot out. It wasn't a laser or a missile. It was a pulse, invisible to the eye, but devastating in effect. The nearest Vaxaran cruiser crumpled like paper, its massive hull bending and collapsing in on itself. The ship imploded in silence, leaving nothing but scattered debris. The bridge of the flagship erupted into chaos. Officers shouted over one another, trying to make sense of what they had just witnessed. The Vaxaren fleet had never seen anything like this. They were the strongest military force in the galaxy, yet one small ship had destroyed one of their largest cruisers in seconds. Thalax gritted his teeth, his confidence now replaced with fury. Concentrate all firepower on that ship. I want it destroyed. The Resolute began to move again, weaving through the fleet with an eerie precision. It was faster and more agile than anything the Vaxarans had ever encountered. Another pulse erupted, and a second cruiser was reduced to rubble. Panic spread among the Vaxaran forces. For the first time in their history, they were outmatched. Thalax stared at the screen, his mind racing. This wasn't a battle. It was a message. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were warning the galaxy. As the Resolute prepared for its next attack, Thalax whispered to himself, "What have we awakened?" The part ends with the Resolute locking onto the flagship, its energy panels glowing brighter than ever, leaving the audience eager to see what happens next. The Deathworlders gamble. The Resolute floated in the midst of chaos, unshaken and untouched. To the Vaxarans, it seemed like a ghost, untouchable, invincible. But inside, the human crew was anything but calm. Captain Alina Reyes stood at the center of the command deck, her gaze locked on the tactical display. She was a woman of sharp instincts and unyielding resolve, molded by years of surviving Earth's harshest conditions. Her voice cut through the tension like a blade. Status report, Carter. Alex Carter, a young engineer with grease-streaked hands, adjusted his headset as he studied the energy readings. Captain, the disruptor is holding steady, but we're pushing it to the edge. Another pulse like that, and we'll need a full system reset. If they overwhelm us, we won't have time. Reyes nodded. Noted. We stick to the plan. They think we're invincible. Let's keep it that way. Behind her, Lieutenant Morgan, the tactical officer, glanced nervously at the display showing the Vaxaran fleet regrouping. Captain, they're coming back in full force. It's only a matter of time before they figure out how to counter us. Reyes smirked. That's what they always do, underestimate the Deathworlders. They've never fought someone who's had to struggle for every breath of air, every drop of water, every scrap of food. We'll show them why you don't corner Earth's survivors. As the crew worked, the story flashed back to Earth. A planet labeled a death world by the Galactic Council, Earth was considered uninhabitable by most species. Its gravity was brutal, its weather unpredictable, and its wildlife deadly. But for humans, it was home. Over millennia, they had adapted to the challenges, their resilience honed to a razor's edge. Years ago, humanity discovered something buried deep within the Earth's crust, an ancient alien artifact, older than recorded history. The artifact emitted a strange energy signature, one that defied known physics. Scientists from every nation studied it, and though they couldn't fully understand it, they knew one thing. It was powerful. The Resolute was humanity's answer to the galaxy's growing threat. Designed around the artifact, it was a ship like no other. Its primary weapon wasn't a cannon or missile, but the ability to manipulate gravity itself. The disruptor could generate localized gravitational fields so intense that they could crush even the strongest materials. But the weapon came at a cost. It consumed an enormous amount of power, leaving the ship vulnerable if used recklessly. Back in the present, Reyes turned to Morgan. Activate Protocol 1. It's time to show them what this ship can really do. Morgan hesitated. Captain, Protocol 1 will drain half our reserves. If it doesn't work. Reyes interrupted, her voice firm. It will work. Trust me. Morgan nodded and began entering the sequence. The Resolute hummed as its systems shifted into high gear. Panels glowed with an eerie blue light, and the ship's hull shimmered faintly as the disruptor prepared for its next move. Meanwhile, on the Vaxaran flagship, Supreme Commander Thalax paced furiously. What do we know about that ship? He demanded. His intelligence officer looked pale. Sir, our scans are still inconclusive. The energy readings are inconsistent. It's as if the ship is running on technology we can't comprehend. Thalax slammed his fist onto the console. Unacceptable. It's one ship. Find its weakness and exploit it. The fleet adjusted its formation, spreading out to encircle the Resolute. The Vaxarans were nothing if not adaptable, and they had fought countless battles against advanced foes, but none of those foes were human. As the Vaxaran ships closed in, the Resolute made its move. The disruptor fired again, but this time, the effect was different. Instead of targeting a single ship, the pulse spread outward, creating a gravitational shockwave. Dozens of Vaxaran fighters spun out of control, their engines failing as the artificial gravity disrupted their systems. Larger ships groaned under the strain, their hulls buckling. On the bridge of the Resolute, the crew erupted in cheers. But Reyes raised a hand, silencing them. This isn't over. They'll adapt. They always do. Sure enough, the Vaxaran fleet began to recalibrate. Their ships emitted counter-gravitational fields, stabilizing themselves. Thalax, watching from his command seat, grinned. Foolish humans. They've shown their hand. Now, we crush them. The Vaxarans launched a coordinated counterattack, firing swarms of energy missiles designed to overload the Resolute's defenses. The human ship weaved through the barrage, its agility unmatched, but the strain on its systems was evident. Warning lights flashed across the command deck. Shields at 40%, Morgan reported. We can't keep this up. Reyes clenched her jaw. Then we don't. Carter, initiate power transfer to the disruptor. We're going for one last pulse. Carter's eyes widened. Captain, that'll leave us defenseless. Reyes met his gaze, her expression unwavering. We're not here to survive. We're here to win. As the crew executed her orders, the Resolute turned to face the flagship. The Vaxarans, emboldened by their apparent advantage, moved in for the kill. But they didn't know the Resolute's secret. The disruptor wasn't just a weapon. It was a message. The part ends with the Resolute unleashing a massive gravitational burst aimed directly at the flagship. The energy wave ripples outward, leaving the audience eager to see whether the gamble will pay off, or if humanity's greatest weapon will be its undoing. The first strike. The darkness of space seemed to hold its breath as the Resolute unleashed its power. From the ship's glowing panels, an enormous gravitational wave rippled outward. The Vaxaran fleet, once an unbreakable wall of warships, became the stage for a deadly spectacle. The wave hit the flagship first. Its reinforced hull groaned and bent, as if it were paper. The massive ship crumpled inward, imploding with a soundless burst of energy that sent shockwaves rippling through the surrounding void. Nearby cruisers suffered similar fates, torn apart by forces they couldn't counter. Ships shattered into fragments, their debris spinning helplessly into the cold abyss. On the Resolute's bridge, the crew stared at the display screens in awe. The once dominant Vaxaran fleet was now a chaotic scene of destruction and disarray. Cheers erupted from the younger crew members, but Captain Alina Reyes remained silent, her expression unreadable. Captain, Lieutenant Morgan said, her voice trembling with both exhilaration and fear. That pulse, we took out their flagship and half their fleet. Reyes didn't take her eyes off the screen. Half is still half too many. They're not finished yet. True to her words, the remaining Vaxaran ships quickly regrouped. Though shaken, their tactics adapted with unnerving precision. Smaller, faster vessels darted through the debris, while larger ships formed a defensive perimeter. They had learned to adjust to the Resolute's gravity weapon, using energy dampeners to weaken its effects. Supreme Commander Thalax, now aboard a secondary command ship, seethed with rage. His once flawless fleet had been reduced to chaos by a single, seemingly insignificant vessel. But the Vaxarans were nothing if not resilient. They had faced advanced technologies before and triumphed. This would be no different. Bring in the Nemesis Protocol, Thalax growled to his tactical officer. The officer hesitated. Sir, the Nemesis drones are experimental. They're untested in live combat. Deploy them. Thalax bellowed, slamming his fist onto the console. If this human ship wants to challenge the galaxy's greatest military, then we'll give them a challenge they won't survive. Back on the Resolute, Reyes was analyzing the Vaxaran movements. She noticed the shift in their strategy. "They're adapting," she muttered. "Good. That means they're scared." Alex Carter, the ship's engineer, was less optimistic. "Captain, we've got a bigger problem. That last pulse drained our reserves faster than anticipated. The disruptor is overheating, and we're down to 60% power. We need time to cool the systems." Reyes clenched her jaw. "Time isn't something we have, Carter." Before he could reply, the sensors blared a new alarm. "Incoming signatures," Morgan shouted. "Dozens of them. No, hundreds. They're launching drones." The screen lit up with a swarm of small, agile vessels emerging from the Vaxaran ships. These weren't ordinary fighters. The drones moved with eerie synchronization, their sleek, angular designs optimized for speed and precision. They formed a deadly cloud that surged toward the Resolute like a swarm of metallic wasps. "Deploy countermeasures," Reyes ordered. "Target their formations and disrupt their patterns." The Resolute's defenses sprang to life, automated turrets swiveling to meet the oncoming threat. High-speed projectiles and energy beams shot into the swarm, taking out dozens of drones. But for every one destroyed, two more seemed to take its place. The drones adapted quickly, learning to evade the ship's weapons. On the bridge, tension mounted. The Resolute shuddered as several drones broke through the defensive perimeter, their energy blasts striking the hull. Sparks flew from consoles, and warning lights flared. "We're taking hits," Morgan called out. "Shields at 35% and dropping." Reyes's mind raced. The drones were a problem, but the real danger was still the Vaxaran fleet. The larger ships were repositioning, closing in like predators circling wounded prey. She turned to Carter. "How long until we can fire the disruptor again?" 5 minutes, minimum," Carter replied, his hands flying across the controls. "But even then, it won't be at full power. If we push it too hard, it might burn out completely." Reyes nodded grimly. "Then we'll have to hold out for 5 minutes." The drones swarmed closer, their attacks relentless. The Resolute weaved through the onslaught, its advanced propulsion systems allowing it to perform maneuvers that would have been impossible for any other ship. But the strain was beginning to show. The ship groaned under the barrage, its shields flickering with each impact. "Captain, we're surrounded," Morgan shouted. "What are your orders?" Reyes's eyes narrowed. "We fight. Carter, reroute all non-essential power to the shields. Morgan, focus fire on their command drones. We'll cut off their control network." The crew moved with precision, executing Reyes's orders with the discipline of a team that had faced impossible odds before. Turrets locked onto the command drones, taking them out one by one. The swarm began to falter, their movements becoming less coordinated. But the Vaxaran fleet wasn't done. Their remaining cruisers unleashed a massive volley of missiles, each one carrying enough firepower to destroy a small moon. The Resolute braced for impact. "Captain, this is it," Carter yelled. Reyes's voice was calm, steady. "Not yet. Hold on to something." As the missiles closed in, the Resolute performed a daring maneuver. The ship's engines flared, and it dove straight toward the center of the swarm. The drones scrambled to adjust, creating a momentary gap in their formation. The Resolute emerged on the other side, the missiles colliding with the drones in a fiery explosion. Reyes allowed herself a small smile. "Time bought. Now let's make it count." The part ends with the Resolute powering up its disruptor, the energy readings spiking as the crew prepares for one final desperate strike. The Vaxarans, battered but unrelenting, pressed their advantage, setting the stage for a climactic confrontation. A desperate counterattack. The battlefield was a shattered graveyard of ships and debris, but the fight was far from over. The Resolute trembled under the weight of the relentless assault. Sparks flew from control panels, and the hum of strained machinery filled the air. The crew worked frantically, knowing that every second counted. Captain Elena Reyes leaned over the command console, her face illuminated by the flickering glow of the tactical display. "Carter, give me an update on the disruptor. Can we fire it yet?" Alex Carter's voice was strained. "Almost, Captain. We've restabilized the core, but the energy output is fluctuating. Another full pulse could overload the system." "We don't have a choice," Reyes said firmly. "The fleet is closing in, and those drones are keeping us pinned down. We either fire the disruptor or we die." Lieutenant Morgan, her tactical officer, glanced nervously at the screen. "Captain, the Vaxaran flagship has deployed another wave of drones. They're adapting to our countermeasures faster than we can program them. And they're protecting their larger ships." Reyes studied the display, her sharp eyes catching the subtle shift in the Vaxaran strategy. The drones weren't just attacking randomly anymore. They were forming a living shield around the enemy cruisers, absorbing incoming fire and creating a nearly impenetrable defense. "They're funneling us," Reyes muttered, "pushing us toward their main fleet. They want us to waste our disruptor on the drones while their big guns take us out." Morgan nodded grimly. "It's working. We're running out of options." Reyes straightened, her jaw set in determination. "Not yet. Carter, what's the minimum charge we need to fire the disruptor?" Carter hesitated. "Captain, a partial charge will be unstable." "It cold." "How much?" Reyes interrupted. 70%. Carter admitted reluctantly. "But it'll be a wild shot. We can't guarantee it'll hit the target." Reyes's lips curved into a faint smile. "Then we'll make sure it does." She turned to Morgan. "Prepare the ship for a slingshot maneuver around that debris field." Morgan's eyes widened. "Captain, that's insane. The gravitational forces could rip us apart." Reyes's gaze didn't waver. "If we stay here, we're dead anyway. Trust me." The crew sprang into action, recalibrating the ship's systems for the daring maneuver. The Resolute veered sharply, diving toward a dense cluster of debris left from the earlier destruction. The move caught the Vaxaran fleet off guard, their drones scrambling to adjust. As the Resolute approached the debris field, Reyes barked orders. "Carter, redirect auxiliary power to the engines. Morgan, feed targeting data into the disruptor. We're going to take the shot while slingshotting through." The ship's engines roared, and the Resolute began to pick up speed. The debris field loomed ahead, a chaotic mess of twisted metal and drifting wreckage. The crew held their breath as the ship wove through the labyrinth, the hull groaning under the strain. On the Vaxaran command ship, Supreme Commander Thelax watched the human ship's movements with a mixture of anger and curiosity. "What are they doing?" he muttered. His tactical officer analyzed the trajectory. "They're heading for the debris field." "Sir, it's reckless." Thalax's eyes narrowed. "Or it's a trap. Ready all weapons. When they emerge, obliterate them." Back on the Resolute, the crew braced themselves as the ship completed its arc around the debris field. The gravitational forces were intense, shaking the ship violently. Panels sparked, and alarms blared, but the crew held steady. "Disruptor charged to 70%, Carter reported. "We're ready." "Target their command cruiser," Reyes ordered. "Morgan, lock it in." Morgan's fingers flew over the controls. "Locked, Captain." Reyes took a deep breath. "Fire." The disruptor unleashed a pulse of energy, but this time it was different. Instead of a wide wave, the pulse was focused, a concentrated beam of gravitational force. The shot streaked through the void, bypassing the drones and striking the Vaxaran command cruiser directly. The impact was catastrophic. The cruiser's hull twisted and contorted, the gravitational forces ripping it apart from the inside. Explosions tore through the ship, and in moments, it was reduced to a smoldering wreck. The Vaxaran fleet faltered. The drones, now without a command signal, began to drift aimlessly. The larger ships hesitated, their movements disorganized. Cheers erupted on the Resolute's bridge, but Reyes wasn't celebrating yet. "Status?" she asked. Morgan scanned the display. The fleet's disoriented, but they're not retreating. They're regrouping. Carter chimed in, his voice tense. "Captain, the disruptor's fried. We overloaded it. It's going to take hours to bring it back online." Reyes nodded, her expression unreadable. "Then we'll have to survive without it." She turned to the crew, her voice steady and firm. "They think we're finished. Let's prove them wrong. Morgan, ready all remaining weapons. Carter, reroute whatever power we have left to the engines. We're not done fighting." The part ends with the Resolute charging headlong into the heart of the Vaxaran fleet, its crew determined to fight to the last breath. The Vaxarans, now more desperate than ever, prepare to unleash their ultimate weapon, setting the stage for an explosive confrontation. The eye of the storm. The Resolute charged forward, its engines roaring like the defiant heartbeat of its crew. Around it, the remnants of the Vaxaran fleet loomed, regrouping into an intimidating formation. The chaotic debris field, once a barrier, now felt like a trap closing in around them. Captain Elena Reyes stood firm, her eyes scanning the tactical display. The bridge lights flickered as the battered ship strained against the demands of its desperate charge. "Morgan, give me a readout. What are we dealing with?" Lieutenant Morgan's voice was tight. "Captain, we've got 2 cruisers and 3 destroyers still operational. The drones are still inactive, but their larger ships are charging weapons. If they fire a coordinated volley, we won't be here to see it." Reyes interrupted, her voice steady. "Carter, what's the status of the disruptor?" Alex Carter slammed his fist against the console in frustration. "Not good. The core is fried. I'm rerouting power to try a manual restart, but even if it works, we'll only get a fraction of its power." Reyes nodded, her mind racing. "A fraction might be enough if we use it differently." Morgan glanced at her, confused. "Captain, the disruptor isn't ready. Are you suggesting?" Reyes cut her off. "Not as a weapon, as a shield." The crew froze, the weight of her words sinking in. Carter broke the silence. "You want to use the disruptor to create a gravitational barrier. Captain, theoretically, it's possible, but it's never been tested." Reyes smirked faintly. "We're making history, Carter. Get it done." The Resolute slowed, pivoting to face the approaching Vaxaran fleet. The enemy ships moved with precision, their weapons glowing ominously as they prepared to fire. On the command deck of the Vaxaran lead cruiser, Supreme Commander Thalax watched with a mix of rage and fascination. "They've stopped," Thalax noted, his voice dripping with disdain. "Perhaps they've finally accepted their fate. Prepare the annihilation volley." His officers moved swiftly, locking the human ship into their targeting systems. The fleet's weapons powered up, their combined energy output enough to obliterate a small planet. Back on the Resolute, Carter's hands flew over the controls as he redirected the ship's remaining power to the disruptor. Sparks rained from overhead panels, and the ship shuddered under the strain. "Captain, we've got partial power to the disruptor," Carter reported. "But this is going to push the core beyond its limits. We might not survive the backlash." Reyes's voice was calm. "We didn't come here to survive, Carter. We came here to win." She turned to Morgan. "When I give the signal, fire everything we have at their lead ship. Keep them focused on us." Morgan hesitated but nodded. "Aye, Captain." The Vaxaran fleet fired. Streams of plasma, energy beams, and missiles streaked toward the Resolute, the void lighting up with a deadly brilliance. At the same moment, Reyes gave the order. "Activate the disruptor. Now." Carter slammed the activation switch. The Resolute shuddered violently as the disruptor came to life, but instead of firing outward, it inverted, creating a dense gravitational field around the ship. The incoming attacks bent and twisted as they entered the field, their trajectories warped by the intense gravity. Missiles spiraled into the debris field, exploding harmlessly, while energy beams curved and dissipated into the void. For a moment, the Resolute stood at the center of a swirling maelstrom, untouched by the fury of the Vaxaran assault. On the enemy bridge, Thalax's confidence faltered as he watched his fleet's weapons rendered useless. "What is this?" he hissed. "How are they doing this?" The answer didn't come, but the Resolute gave one of its own. Morgan launched a concentrated barrage from the ship's remaining weapons, targeting the nearest Vaxaren cruiser. The surprise attack caught the enemy off guard, and the cruiser's shields flickered before collapsing. A well-placed missile hit its engine core, triggering a chain reaction that tore the ship apart. Cheers erupted on the Resolute's bridge, but Reyes raised a hand to silence them. "Focus. The shield won't hold forever." Carter's voice confirmed her fears. "Captain, the disruptor's core is reaching critical levels. We got maybe 90 seconds before it overloads." Reyes nodded. "Then we make every second count. Morgan, target their command ship. Carter, prepare for a controlled shutdown of the disruptor. We're going to punch through their formation." Morgan hesitated. "Captain, if the disruptor fails mid-maneuver?" Reyes's gaze was steely. "It won't fail. Execute the order." The Resolute powered forward, its gravitational shield warping the space around it as it cut through the Vaxaren formation. The enemy ships scrambled to adjust, their precise formation breaking into chaos. The Resolute targeted the command ship, unleashing a relentless assault. Explosions erupted across the Vaxaren cruiser's hull as the smaller ship outmaneuvered its larger prey. On the Vaxaren bridge, Thalax gripped the edge of his console, his calm demeanor now replaced with panic. Evasive maneuvers. Destroy that ship. But it was too late. The Resolute's final volley struck the Vaxaren command ship's reactor. The explosion lit up the void, a blinding beacon of destruction. The shockwave rippled outward, disabling the remaining Vaxaren ships and leaving them adrift. Back on the Resolute, the gravitational shield finally collapsed, and the ship fell silent. The bridge was filled with the sound of labored breathing and the crackle of damaged systems. Reyes sat back in her chair, her expression unreadable. "Status?" she asked. Morgan scanned the sensors. "Their fleet is crippled, Captain. They're retreating." A collective sigh of relief swept through the crew, but Reyes remained focused. "Good. But this isn't over. Carter, start repairs. Morgan, monitor their movements. Let's be ready in case they come back." As the Resolute drifted in the quiet aftermath, Reyes looked out at the stars. "We're not done yet," she whispered. "Not until they understand what humanity is capable of." The part ends with the crew rallying to repair the ship, knowing the war is far from over, but having proven that even in the face of overwhelming odds, humanity will never back down. The final stand. The silence of space was deafening after the destruction of the Vaxaren command ship. The once mighty fleet, now reduced to scattered wreckage, began to retreat. But on the Resolute's bridge, there was no celebration, only grim determination. The battle wasn't over yet. Captain Alina Reyes stood at the command console, her hands gripping its edge. "Morgan, status on the remaining ships." Lieutenant Morgan's fingers flew over the controls. "Captain, 5 cruisers are still operational, though their formations are disorganized. The rest of the fleet is either retreating or dead in the water. Their drones remain inactive, but I wouldn't count on that lasting." Alex Carter, the ship's engineer, wiped sweat from his brow. "Captain, the disruptor is done. The core's fried beyond repair. We've got basic weapons and propulsion, but not much else. If they regroup, we're a sitting duck." Reyes nodded, her expression unreadable. "Then we can't give them the chance to regroup. Morgan, prepare a tactical scan of their remaining ships. Let's find their weak spot." The bridge lights flickered as the ship's battered systems struggled to keep up. The crew worked with a quiet intensity, knowing that every decision in the next few minutes could mean life or death. Morgan's voice broke the silence. "Captain, I've identified something. Their lead cruiser, what's left of their command structure, appears to have a relay system tied to the drones. If we take it out, the rest of the fleet will lose coordination. They'll be vulnerable." Reyes's lips curved into a faint smile. "Perfect. target their relay systems, and prepare for a precision strike. But Captain, Carter interjected, we're barely holding together as it is. Even a small engagement could tear this ship apart. Reyes turned to face him, her eyes sharp and unwavering. Carter, this isn't just about survival. If we let them retreat, they'll regroup and come back stronger. We have to end this now. The crew moved with purpose, adjusting systems and rerouting power to what little weaponry remained. The Resolute turned to face the remaining Vaxaran ships, engines flaring as it accelerated toward its target. On board the Vaxaran lead cruiser, Supreme Commander Thelax stood amidst the chaos, his calm demeanor replaced by seething frustration. What is that cursed ship doing now? He demanded. His tactical officer, bloodied and shaken, analyzed the human vessel's movements. They're targeting us, sir, directly. Thelax's eyes narrowed. Fools. They're crippled. Prepare the fleet for a concentrated counterattack. I want that ship destroyed. The Vaxaran cruisers began to realign, their weapons charging for a final assault. The air on the Resolute grew tense as the two forces closed the distance. Captain, they're preparing a broadside, Morgan reported. If they fire first. They won't, Ray said, cutting her off. We're not going to give them the chance. As the Resolute neared the lead cruiser, Reyes gave the order. All weapons, focus on the relay system. Fire everything we've got. The Resolute unleashed its remaining arsenal. Missiles streaked through the void, their trails glowing like comets, while the ship's automated turrets peppered the target with high-speed projectiles. The barrage struck the lead cruiser's hull, tearing through its defenses and exposing the vulnerable relay system. But the Vaxarans weren't idle. Their ships fired back, a torrent of plasma and energy beams lighting up the darkness. The Resolute danced through the onslaught, its advanced propulsion systems allowing it to evade much of the fire, but not all. Explosions rocked the ship, and sparks rained down on the bridge. Shields at critical levels. Morgan shouted, "We can't take much more." Reyes gritted her teeth. "Stay on course. We're almost there." A massive explosion lit up the tactical display as one of the Resolute's missiles struck the relay system dead-on. The Vaxaran lead cruiser shuddered, its power systems failing as the relay overloaded. Across the battlefield, the remaining Vaxaran ships faltered, their coordinated movements breaking apart. The drones, once a synchronized swarm, floated aimlessly, their control signals severed. The Vaxaran fleet, now disorganized and leaderless, began to withdraw in earnest. "Captain, the cruisers are retreating," Morgan reported. "They're falling back to the edges of the system." Reyes allowed herself a moment of relief. "Good. Let them run." But before the crew could celebrate, Carter's voice rang out, filled with urgency. "Captain, I'm detecting a massive energy spike from the Vaxaran lead cruiser. It's their reactor. It's going critical." Reyes's eyes widened. "They're trying to take us with them. Carter, get us out of here." Full power to the engines, the Resolute veered away from the crippled cruiser, its engines roaring as it pushed past its limits. Behind them, the Vaxaran ship erupted in a blinding explosion, the force of the blast sending shockwaves through the debris field. The bridge shook violently, and the crew held on as the Resolute was buffeted by the explosion. Alarms blared, and lights flickered before stabilizing. When the ship finally steadied, Reyes looked around at her crew. They were bruised, battered, but alive. "Status?" she asked. Morgan scanned the readings. "We're clear, Captain. The Vaxarans are gone." The bridge fell silent as the weight of the victory settled over them. Reyes exhaled slowly, her shoulders relaxing for the first time in hours. "Good work, everyone. Let's start repairs and send a message to Earth. They need to know what happened here." As the Resolute drifted in the aftermath of the battle, its hull scared but unbroken, Reyes gazed out at the distant stars. "We've shown them what Deathworlders can do," she murmured. "But this war isn't over. Not yet." The part ends with a sense of quiet triumph, but also foreboding, as the crew prepares for the next chapter in their fight for survival. Victory or oblivion. The silence on the Resolute's bridge was profound, broken only by the occasional crackle of damaged systems and the low hum of the ship's engines. The crew was exhausted, their faces smeared with soot and sweat, but their eyes remained sharp. They knew the battle wasn't just about survival, it was about sending a message. Captain Alina Reyes stood at the center of the command deck, her posture unyielding despite the toll of the fight. Morgan confirmed the status of the Vaxaren fleet. Lieutenant Morgan, pale but resolute, worked her console. Captain, the majority of their ships have retreated beyond the system. The drones are still inactive, and their larger vessels are limping out of range. It's over. Reyes didn't relax. Her instincts told her that with the Vaxarans, there was always a chance for one last desperate move. Carter, how's the ship? Alex Carter wiped his grimy hands on his jumpsuit. We're running on fumes, Captain. The disruptor's toast. The shields are gone, and the engines are held together by duct tape and prayers. But we're alive. Reyes allowed herself a small, weary smile. That's all I needed to hear. The Resolute floated amid the wreckage of the battle, its dark hull reflecting the faint glow of distant stars. For the first time in hours, the tension on the bridge began to ease. Some of the younger crew members exchanged tentative smiles, realizing they had just survived a fight that should have been impossible. But Reyes wasn't ready to celebrate. This isn't just about us, she said, her voice cutting through the quiet. Morgan, open a channel to Earth. Morgan hesitated. Captain, long-range communications are damaged. It'll take time to patch through. Then we'll use what we have, Reyes said firmly. We need to make sure the galaxy knows what happened here. Morgan nodded and began working. Meanwhile, Reyes turned to the crew. This ship may be crippled, but we've shown the galaxy something they can't ignore. Humanity isn't just another species. We're Deathworlders. We don't just survive. We fight, we adapt, and we win. The crew straightened, pride shining through their exhaustion. They had endured the impossible and come out the other side. They had proven what humanity was capable of. The comm system crackled to life. Channel open, Captain, Morgan said. Reyes stepped forward, her voice steady and commanding as she addressed the galaxy. This is Captain Alina Reyes of the Resolute, representing Earth and the United Galactic Alliance. Today, we face the Vaxaran Empire, the so-called strongest military force in the galaxy. They came with an armada, and we stood with a single ship. They underestimated us. They always do. She paused, letting her words sink in. But today, we showed them what it means to face Deathworlders. We fight not for conquest, but for survival. And if you come for us, be prepared to face the same. Earth stands ready, and so does humanity. The message ended, the signal weak but defiant. Reyes turned back to the crew. Let's start salvage operations. We'll need every piece of debris out there to get this ship moving again. As the crew moved to their tasks, the stars seemed to grow brighter. The battle was over, but the war wasn't. Reyes knew the Vaxarans would regroup, that they would come back stronger, but she also knew that humanity would be ready. Supreme Commander Thalax watched the message from his temporary command ship, his expression dark and unreadable. His fleet was broken, his reputation shattered, and his confidence in the Empire's supremacy shaken. He clenched his fists, his pride warring with the gnawing realization that the humans were not like any enemy the galaxy had faced before. This isn't over, he muttered to himself. Not by a long shot. Back on the Resolute, Reyes stood at the observation deck, watching the wreckage drift away. She allowed herself a moment to reflect, her thoughts heavy but hopeful. The galaxy had seen humanity's strength, and for the first time, they would know what it meant to fight a Deathworlder. The part ends with the Resolute limping away from the battlefield, its scars a testament to its victory. The crew is battered but unbroken, and the galaxy is forever changed by the defiance of one small ship against impossible odds. a quiet tension lingers, hinting at the battles yet to come and the unyielding spirit of humanity that will face them head-on.